Imagine bringing home a Christmas tree so perfect it feels almost magical until the ornaments start moving on their own. Whispers creep through the night and the lights flicker like they're alive. What if the tree wasn't just a tree, but a cursed relic with a sinister plan for your family? This is the chilling tale of the curse of the forgotten Christmas tree, a holiday horror that will make you think twice before ever bringing a tree into your home again. Stay with me if you dare, because this is a story you won't forget. It started like any other Christmas. My family was excited. Decorations were up and the house was filled with the warm glow of lights and the scent of pine. But this year felt different, a touch off. It was the Christmas tree that did it. It was a cold December afternoon when we drove past the lonely roadside tree vendor. His small makeshift stall stood in the shadow of a dense forest, surrounded by nothing but a sea of snow-covered fields. I remember the moment like it was frozen in time for a flash of something unusual. A glimpse of an old man with eyes like dark wells staring at us as we passed. "We should get our tree here," Mom said, her voice cheerful. "Look at that one." She pointed to a tall, elegant tree standing slightly apart from the others, its needles a deep, unnatural green. "Are you sure?" Dad asked, glancing at the sky as if the ominous clouds gathering overhead meant something. "It looks odd." Mom gave him a reassuring smile. "Perfect for Christmas. It's unique, just like our family." Pulled over, my little sister Clara practically bounced out of the car. She was too excited to notice how the old vendor's eyes followed her every move or how his smile seemed forced. "You've got a good eye," the vendor said as he handed over the tree. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in a long time. "That one, she's special." Dad paid him, trying not to show how uneasy he was. The air felt heavy, like something was watching us. Not the usual excitement of picking out a Christmas tree, but something darker. The tree fits perfectly in our living room. It was tall, reaching all the way to the ceiling, and as we began decorating, that's when things started going wrong. The first night it was the ornaments. My parents had spent hours hanging them snowflakes, stars, glass baubles, but when we woke up the next morning, the ornaments had moved. Some hung upside down, others twisted around branches they didn't belong to. "Must have been the cat," Dad joked, but even Clara seemed unsettled. That night, the whispers started. I was lying awake in bed when I heard them, soft murmurs faint at first, like a breeze passing through the trees outside. But the whispers seemed to be coming from inside the house, somewhere near the living room. I assumed it was just my imagination, but when I tiptoed out to check, the feeling of dread made my stomach twist. The tree's lights flickered, not in random patterns, but in sequences. A beat, a pause, a pulse. Like something was alive. He answered. The next morning, my parents seemed oblivious. They insisted everything was fine, that I was just letting my imagination get the better of me. Clara, however, wasn't so sure. She clung to me, whispering about how the ornaments had shifted again overnight, this time forming strange patterns. A star was now placed in the center of the tree, hovering above the others. "No one put it there," she said softly. "It just moved." The days leading up to Christmas were surreal. Each night brought something new. The whispers grew louder. Sometimes they sounded like faint voices, laughing, calling us names. Mom complained about headaches, and Dad began staying up late to watch the tree, his gaze locked on it like he was expecting something to happen. One evening, as I walked past the living room, I saw something strange in the reflection of the glass ornaments. A shadow moved behind them, a figure, twisted and dark, watching us. When I blinked, it was gone. The strangest part was the feeling of being watched, not from the house, but from something older, like the tree had memories. By Christmas Eve, it wasn't just the tree anymore. The whispers had become clearer, a woman's voice with a cold, hollow tone. "They will come for you," it said over and over. "You can't escape." Clara wouldn't come out of her room. She curled up under her blankets, whispering about the lights moving on their own. "It's not the electricity," she said. "They follow me." Dad, no longer trying to comfort us, spoke in hushed tones with Mom. "This isn't normal," he said. "That tree, it's cursed." On Christmas morning, I found something else waiting for us beneath the tree. A note, a simple, folded piece of paper with a message in an old faded ink. "The past never dies." When I read it aloud, Clara screamed. "It's inside the tree." The ornaments began spinning on their own, faster and faster, until they were a blur of glass and silver. The lights flickered violently, and shadows crept along the walls like tendrils. "No, stop!" Mom cried out as the tree pulsed with life. Dad grabbed an axe, swinging wildly at the branches. But no matter how much he hacked away, the tree wouldn't fall. The roots seemed to dig deeper into the floorboards, holding it in place. The whispers turned into screams, louder and louder. "They're here! They're here!" And then silence. When we finally dared to look again, the tree was gone, but in its place, no decorations, no ornaments, just a single figure standing where it once stood. The old man, his dark eyes locked onto ours and a smile played on his twisted lips. "It took that this tree isn't just a tree," he said softly. "It's a memory, a curse that will never let you go." And as he vanished into the shadows, we knew Christmas would never be the same again. The silence after the old man disappeared was almost worse than the chaos that had preceded it. My parents stood frozen, gripping each other as if to ground themselves in the reality that had shattered before us. Clara was the first to speak. It's gone," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "The tree, it's really gone." But the sense of dread didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier, pressing down on us like an unseen weight. The house felt colder, emptier. "We need to get out of here," Dad finally said, his voice strained and low. "We should leave, now." Mom nodded quickly, grabbing Clara's hand. "Grab your things, we're leaving the house." I hesitated. "What about the lights, the ornaments?" "They're just gone," Dad muttered, shaking his head in disbelief as he checked the spot where the tree had once stood. All of it. We rushed through the house, gathering essentials while outside the snow continued to fall, blanketing everything in an endless cold expanse. But no amount of distance could shake the feeling of the tree's malevolent presence lingering in our memories. The days following Christmas were a blur of restless nights and uneasy silence. We moved in with my aunt, who lived several towns away, thinking that putting as much distance between us and the house would erase what we had experienced. But it didn't. At night, I could still hear the whispers. They came to me in dreams, visions of the tree, the old man, and a haunting melody that played from nowhere. No matter where we went, the memories clung to us like a shadow. Damn, at times I felt like I was being pulled by something towards the shadow. One evening, while flipping through old photo albums, I found a strange image tucked away in the back of the book. It was of our family at Christmas last year. A family picture with the same eerie tree standing behind us. Only in this photo, the tree's ornaments were not only dark and twisted, but its eyes seemed to follow us as we looked at the picture. I showed it to my parents, but they just shook their heads, dismissing it as a trick of the light or an old camera malfunction. Still, something gnawed at the back of my mind, a feeling that this image was more than just an innocent mistake. Weeks passed, and the nightmares worsened. Each dream was a variation of the same scene, the tree, the old man, and the same dark, icy voice whispering, "Mount Mars. They will come for you." The fear seeped into my waking hours, becoming harder to escape. Then one night, it all reached its peak. I woke up to a chilling presence in my room, a shadow standing by my bedside. My breath caught in my throat as I struggled to move, to scream. The whispers returned, clearer this time. "You belong to us," the voice hissed, sending shivers down my spine. "You can't run. You can't hide." I shut my eyes tightly, begging for it to stop. My mind raced for answers, for a way to escape the torment that was slowly consuming me. The next morning, I found a strange bruise on my wrist, a handprint, dark and cold. It looked as though someone had gripped me tightly, yet there was no one else in the room. Mom and Dad noticed it immediately, and their faces grew pale. "It's back," Dad whispered hoarsely. "The tree isn't gone." That evening, we sat in the living room of my aunt's house, talking in hushed tones. The distant hum of conversation could be heard from the other rooms, but it did little to comfort us. "We can't escape it," Mom said quietly, her voice trembling. "The tree, it was never just a tree. It's something darker, older. We have to stop it," I insisted. "We have to destroy it, for good." Dad clenched his fist, pacing back and forth. "But how? How do we defeat something like this? We don't even understand what it is." "Well," suddenly Clara spoke up from her corner. "What if it's not just the tree? What if it's the forest? The old man said something about memories, didn't he? Mom and Dad exchanged uneasy glances. Clara's words hung in the air like a warning. "The forest," Mom whispered, a tremor in her voice. "It's been there for centuries before the tree. Maybe it holds the same curse." The idea terrified us all. The thought of something that old, that rooted in history, stretching beyond just a single tree was unbearable. But if the tree had found its way to us, how long before the forest itself came for us? In the days that followed, we began research in the area. We dug through old archives, history books, and folklore, looking for clues to anything that might explain what we were dealing with. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just an isolated incident. The forest had a long history of strange occurrences, tales of lost travelers, abandoned towns, and curses tied to the very trees that grew within it. Our discovery led us to an unsettling conclusion. The forest was alive. And the tree, the one we had brought into our home, was its harbinger. "We can't let it spread," Dad said firmly. "If the forest is connected to this, we have to burn it down." "But what about the old man?" I asked. "He knew. He wanted us to take the tree," Mom shivered. "He's part of it. A guardian of the curse, maybe." With no other choice, we planned a way to destroy the tree, though we knew it wouldn't be easy. Every night, the whispers returned stronger, more persistent. They told us that no matter where we ran, the curse would follow. And the darkness of the forest was only growing closer. The decision to confront the forest felt like marching toward our own doom. But what choice did we have? It wasn't just a matter of fear anymore. We couldn't live under the shadow of this curse forever. Dad gathered everything we might need, gasoline, matches, and a rusty old axe he'd found in the garage. His determination was clear, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Mom stayed close to Clara, holding her tightly as if letting go would make her disappear. And me, I tried to be brave, but the whispers were already starting again. They didn't wait for night anymore. The drive to the forest felt endless. Snow fell in heavy flakes, muffling the world around us. No one spoke. The car was filled with the weight of what we were about to do. When we finally arrived, the forest loomed before us like a wall of shadow. The trees stood unnaturally still, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms. The old man's stall was gone, as if it had never existed, but the clearing where we had found the tree was unmistakable. "We start here," Dad said, gripping the axe tightly. The moment we stepped into the clearing, the air changed. It was colder, heavier, and filled with the faint scent of decay. Clara clung to Mom, her wide eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap out at us. "It's watching us," she whispered. I felt it too. The forest wasn't just alive, it was aware. Dad poured gasoline around the base of the nearest trees, creating a ring of fuel. "If we burn this spot, maybe it'll weaken whatever's controlling it," he said, though his voice wavered with doubt. As he struck the match, a gust of wind blew through the clearing, snuffing it out. The forest seemed to laugh, a low, guttural sound that echoed all around us. "Try again," Mom urged, her voice shaking. This time, Dad shielded the match with his hand. The flame caught, and the gasoline ignited with a roar. Fire spread quickly, licking up the trunks of the trees. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope, but then the whispers came back. They were louder now, rising into a deafening chorus. Shadows twisted and danced in the firelight, forming shapes that seemed almost human. The flames began to waver as if the forest itself was fighting back. "That's enough, let's go!" Mom screamed, pulling Clara toward the car. But as we turned to leave, the ground beneath us trembled. Roots burst through the snow, snaking toward us like living things. One wrapped around Dad's ankle, pulling him to the ground. "Run!" he shouted, swinging the axe wildly to free himself. We didn't want to leave him, but the roots were closing in fast. Mom dragged Clara and me toward the edge of the clearing, her grip like iron. Behind us, the fire roared higher, consuming more of the forest. The whispers turned into screams, angry, desperate cries that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When we finally made it back to the car, Mom fumbled with the keys, her hands trembling. Come on, she muttered, glancing back at the forest where Dad was still fighting the roots. Just as the engine roared to life, Dad broke free, stumbling toward us. He was covered in dirt and ash, his face pale but determined. "Drive!" he shouted, slamming the car door shut behind him. Mom didn't need to be told twice. She floored the gas pedal and we sped away from the clearing, the flame still visible in the rearview mirror. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away. None of us spoke. The car was filled with the smell of smoke and fear. When we finally pulled over to catch our breath, Dad turned to look at us. I think we did it, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. But as we sat there in the silence, a familiar sound reached my ears. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. No, I whispered, my voice barely audible. It's not over. Clara started crying, burying her face in Mom's shoulder. Dad gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. We burned the clearing, Mom said, her voice shaking. We saw it burn. But deep down, we all knew the truth. The forest was too old, too powerful. The fire had only been a temporary reprieve. That night, back at my aunt's house, I dreamed of the tree again, but this time it wasn't alone. The old man stood beside it, his dark eyes fixed on me. You can't escape, he said, his voice a cold whisper that echoed in my mind. The roots run deeper than you can imagine. When I woke up, the bruise on my wrist was darker, colder, and on the bedside table where there had been nothing before was a single pine needle. The curse wasn't bound to the forest, it was bound to us. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The curse wasn't tied to the forest or even the tree. It was tied to us. No matter where we went, no matter how far we ran, the whispers, the shadows, the cold they would follow. The pine needle on my bedside table was a cruel reminder of that truth. I didn't tell Mom or Dad about it. They were already on edge, and I didn't want to make it worse. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The next few days passed in a tense haze. We stayed indoors, barely speaking. Clara clung to Mom constantly, her once bright spirit dimmed by the weight of everything we had experienced. Dad buried himself in books and online forums, desperately searching for answers. Then, late one night, he found something. It's not just a curse, he said, his voice low and grim as we sat around the dining table. It's a binding, the tree. It wasn't just alive, it was a vessel, a way for whatever's out there to latch onto us. How do we stop it, Mom asked, her voice trembling. Dad hesitated. There's only one way. We have to sever the connection, and that means going back. The thought of returning to the forest made my stomach churn. We had barely escaped the first time. Going back felt like walking straight into a trap, but Dad was certain it was the only way. There is an old ritual, he explained, showing us the notes he had compiled. It's dangerous, but it's our best shot. We need to find the exact spot where the tree stood and perform the ritual there. If we can destroy the source of the binding, we can break the curse. Won't the forest fight back? Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad nodded grimly. It will, but if we don't do this, it'll never stop. The following night, we packed what little we needed and made our way back to the forest. The drive was silent, the air thick with dread. Even Clara, who usually found comfort in holding Mom's hand, sat still and pale, staring out the window. When we reached the forest edge, it was like stepping into another world. The snow-covered ground sparkled under the moonlight, but the trees cast long, menacing shadows. The clearing where we had found the tree was blackened and charred, but the air was thick with an unnatural cold. We'll do this quickly, Dad said, his voice firm but quiet. He set up a circle of salt around the spot where the tree had stood, placing candles at each cardinal point. In the center, he laid out an old book he had found during his research. We need to work together, he said, looking at each of us in turn. Stay inside the circle no matter what happens. As Dad began to chant the words from the book, the air grew heavier. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a living thing. Shadows began to move at the edge of the clearing, twisting and writhing as if trying to break through the salt barrier. The whispers returned, louder this time. They weren't just voices, they were screams, laughter, and guttural growls, all blending together in a chaotic symphony. "Keep going!" Mom shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise. Dad's hands shook as he read from the book, his voice growing louder with each word. The shadows pressed closer, their forms becoming more distinct. I could see faces in them, twisted, angry faces with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Then, the ground began to shake. A dark, gnarled root burst through the charred soil, writhing like a snake. It reached for the circle, but the salt held it back, for now. "I have a feeling about this," said the one. "It's fighting us," Mom yelled, holding Clara close. "We're almost there," Dad shouted back, flipping to the final page of the ritual. But then the root lunged again, breaking through the salt barrier. It wrapped around Dad's leg, pulling him toward the center of the clearing. "No!" I screamed, grabbing his arm. The shadows surged forward and the whispers turned into a deafening roar. The air grew colder, and I could feel the darkness pressing against my skin, trying to drag me under. "Finish it," Dad shouted, shoving the book into my hands. Tears blurred my vision as I read the final words of the ritual. The moment I spoke the last syllable, a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the forest as the root released its grip on Dad. For a moment, everything was still. When the light faded, the clearing was empty. The charred ground was untouched, as if the tree had never been there. The air felt lighter and the oppressive cold was gone. "Is it over?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. Dad nodded, his face pale but relieved. "I think so." Clara started crying, but this time it was out of relief. I held her close, my own tears falling freely. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. We left the forest that night, vowing never to return. Life slowly returned to normal, though the memories of what we had experienced stayed with us. Despite the challenges of my life, I reflect, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear faint whispers in the wind, and when I close my eyes, I see the old man's face, smiling faintly as he disappears into the shadows. The curse may be broken, but the forest is still out there, waiting, watching. And I can't help but wonder, did we truly escape, or is this just the calm before the storm? If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Scary for more bone-chilling horror stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that'll keep you awake at night. And tell us in the comments, would you dare to bring home a mysterious Christmas tree? Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, the scariest stories might just be true. See you in the next nightmare.